On to the big story of the day. Of course, the government has won its appeal to keep almost 140 migrants at the Bell Hotel in Epping in Essex. A win for the Home Office, of course, but branded an injustice by local residents.
I suppose they knew it was going to happen. Senior judges overturned an earlier order to move the men out by mid-September, saying that the first ruling was seriously flawed.
Therefore, we grant permission to appeal both to Somani and to the Home Secretary against the grant of the interim injunction. We allow the appeals and we set aside the injunction imposed on 19 August 2025.
The decision has reignited anger in Epping, where the hotel has been a flashpoint, of course, for weeks of protests.
But the Border Security Minister, Dame Angela Eagles, says the government remains committed to ending the use of migrant hotels.
Well, nobody wants to close the Bell Hotel and all other asylum hotels more than me, and we have pledged that we are going to do that by the end of the Parliament. Today's judgment allows us to do it in a planned and managed way so that we can get the system running and make sure that we can exit hotels for once and for all.
Well, the spotlight is now on the judge himself, one of them anyway, who delivered the verdict. His name is Lord Justice Bean. He's on your screen now if you're watching on television. He was reportedly, get this, a Labour Party member for almost 3 decades and a former chair of a leading socialist group.
So a lot of people are asking now, of course, are Britain's courts straying into political territory? And is this the win that the government actually hoped it to be?
Well, earlier this morning we spoke to former Home Office Minister Tom Pursglove, who claims the government's reliance on hotels is a choice and that it doesn't have to be this way.
I would say that the choices that government has made has meant that there is a much greater reliance on hotels as there otherwise needed to be, because of the fact that they scrapped the large sites, because of the fact that crossing numbers are up by 50%, because of the fact that there's no deterrent and no ability to be able to relocate people elsewhere. What's so frustrating, agonising, it drives me mad. I want to shout at the telly when I see, for example, that the Americans are now using the accommodation that British taxpayers paid for in Rwanda that could be accommodating some of those people who've arrived here illegally, and which would, in sending them there, help us to shut the route down and put all of the gangs that are doing this out of business, because they would then know that if you get to the UK, you're not going to be staying here because you're going to Rwanda. That's a far better position. And I just think ministers, as I say, have got to get real on this and have got to change the dial, got to change the approach, because what they're doing is not working. It's making a bad situation far, far worse, and the public's had enough.
Well, we're joined now by GB News national reporter Jack Carson, who's up there by the Bell. Very good morning to you. I mean, it looks like a lovely morning, but what's the mood locally like after last night's or yesterday's revelation?
Well, I think the initial reaction to the result was one lady put it to us that she was devastated, but another lady said that in her eyes, in her mind, there was still hope. That's because we've still got the full court hearing as to whether there is a permanent removal of asylum seekers from the Bell Hotel coming up in October. That essentially is also very much the feeling from Epping Forest District Council. They said they were looking into all possible routes, including that would mean the Supreme Court, but they did, of course, look forward to the court hearing that they have in October in terms of a permanent injunction. This Court of Appeal, of course, overturning the temporary injunction. Protesters gathered here last night, many of them peaceful, wanting their voice heard, but Essex Police did confirm that 3 men were arrested yesterday and remain in custody this morning. They say one man was arrested on suspicion of violent disorder, a second man was arrested on suspicion of assaulting a police officer, and a third was arrested on suspicion of drink driving after a car was driven on the wrong side of the road towards a police cordon. So that was in much of the later part of the evening of the protests that were taking place here, but many people have come out to express their views and express their thoughts around the overturning of that temporary injunction. Take a listen to a couple of people that we spoke to last night.
Absolutely disgusting. Devastated. Feel like crying. We come here every week, show our support, and then they've taken it that they've got more rights done us citizens an absolute disgrace.
There has to be suitable places to put them, not within communities, not scattered about houses. They're unchecked, and that makes them dangerous.
That's the view of those couple of Epping residents. Very much that view reflected across a lot of people that gathered here last night. Now, Dame Angela Eagle, the Home Office Minister, says that the reason that they appealed the decision in the first place, the injunction in the first place, was because they wanted to end hotel use in what they called a controlled and orderly way. With the Court of Appeal citing in their judgment to overturn the decision that the Justice Eyre, who had made that temporary injunction, had made a number of errors in principle, including the idea that closing one site means capacity has to be found elsewhere in the system. But there was also concern from those judges who handed down that ruling yesterday that it could actually incentivise disorderly and unlawful protests around asylum accommodation if the council's delay, along then obviously with the council's delay in bringing the decision in the first place. Just a couple of reasons as to why the Court of Appeal said they overturned the decision. Now, in terms of incentivising possibly other councils around the country to do something similar, it's been reported in the newspapers over yesterday and today that 13 other councils are considering pressing ahead with legal action over the use of asylum hotels in their area, including, it's thought, some Labour-run authorities as well. So certainly this issue is not going away here in Epping, but it seems like around the country it's not going away either.
Indeed. Jack Carson, thank you very much. On the ground at the Bell Hotel in Epping. We're joined in the studio by political commentator Theo Usherwood. Theo, good morning, welcome back. Yeah. When is the government going to get it into their heads that people don't want these asylum seekers or illegal migrants in hotels? Mm-hmm. They don't want them in HMOs. We don't want them here at all, quite frankly, the great British public, the majority of them anyway. All this kind of talk about hotels and bus passes and what should we do with them, should they be in detention centres, is a red herring for me. We've got to the point now where people aren't interested. They've had enough. Stop them coming in the first place. Does the government understand that?
I think the government does understand that. I think what it can do practically, though, whilst we remain signatories to the European Convention on Human Rights, it was used in this particular case by the Home Office to appeal the original decision in the High Court, which basically meant that the 138 asylum seekers in the Bell Hotel would have to be moved out of the hotel by September the 12th. And the government needs to, if it wants to deal with this particular problem, it needs to leave the ECHR. And Keir Starmer has made clear to date that he is not prepared to do it because he said it would affect our agreements, treaties with other countries that are signatories to the ECHR. And therefore he's not prepared to do it. Now, I understand there may actually be, as we head into the autumn, some movement within the government on this particular issue, that things might be starting to shift.
A year.
Precisely. And then, of course, many of your listeners and viewers will wonder, well, hang on a moment, given that they've challenged this original decision, can we actually trust Keir Starmer and the Labour government to take us out of the ECHR?
Sorry, just to clarify, you're hearing whispers that the government is prepared to move or look at the ECHR?
I say it cautiously, but I don't think that their position at the moment is necessarily set. And I think as we head into the autumn and you're looking at conference season, I think there may be, they may be starting to look at this particular
Isn't that
issue.
amazing? Because we're hearing that Kemi Badenoch is probably going to make some sort of an announcement on her attitude towards the ECHR in conference coming up. And you're saying that Keir Starmer is probably going to be under pressure to do the same thing.
Yeah, I think there's the problem they've got is that they can't, and you listen to Tom Pursglove, their former immigration minister, the problem they've got is that they cannot deport people to Rwanda. Boris Johnson's government created the Rwanda scheme. Not one person was spent for the £700 million that was spent on the scheme to Rwanda because of the ECHR. We have people who come to this country who are claiming, you've seen the cases. There was a case about chicken nuggets. There was a case about, right to a family life. Whatever, they're cases, and that's the way the law is being applied. And in order to stop those, to deal with that issue, it is clear that some radical reform of our international treaties is going to be needed. Now, Nigel Farage just made the point, in his view, it needs to be wholesale reform. You can't just tinker around the edges and say, well, we want judges to be mindful of this, or apply the law in this way, or not use it in these particular cases. His argument is you just need to strip it out of British law, and we need to leave it, and then you'll be able to run a scheme on this issue. Sorry.
What does instinct tell you about what Keir Starmer would say? I can't see him going all the way, can you?
No, I don't. I would be surprised if he, given you've got Lord Hermer as the Attorney General,
exactly.
and his adherence to international law. We saw what happened with the Chagos Islands. I would be very surprised if indeed Labour does propose anything, but if they go the whole hog.
I mean, he'll go and ask a focus group what they think, and then probably ask some lawyers in Geneva, and then ask his MPs, and then make a decision off the bat. He doesn't believe in anything. He's got no ideology.
But he would face a revolution from the backbenchers, his own backbenchers.
Yeah. I think that's a very good point. And I think, it's worth just remembering the positioning for many Labour MPs, particularly those on the left, of Keir Starmer, not just opposition within his own cabinet from people like Lord Hermer, but also from his backbenchers if he was to take a much harder line. Because leaving the ECHI sounds like it is legalese, right? But we're talking about some fairly ugly policies. We've seen when we were speaking earlier about what was happening in America and the stance that Donald Trump has taken. People being deported, families being removed from the UK, potentially the use of detention camps overseas where people are having their applications processed.
Are they ugly policies? I'd argue lots of Brits would agree with detention centres with no right to leave to...
The French President, Emmanuel Macron, of the centre-left, has made the point that this country has too many pull factors, that people come to this country, and he made it on a state visit when he came to the NATO HQ up in northwest London, that there were too many pull factors. You can come to this country and you can work, because we had this situation with delivery drivers, people delivering food around the country and then using proxy accounts in order to be paid, and you can receive comfortable free accommodation.
They have a well of time. They get bus passes into the local town centre, as per RAF Wethersfield. They get £40 a week, up to £48 a week on Aspen cars. You get NHS dentistry and GPs in the reception of the hotels. You've got Wi-Fi. You can work illegally for Deliveroo.
But given where people are coming from, and given the countries that people are coming from, and the desperation that many of these people, not all of these people, face, I don't blame the migrants. The problem is the system is broken and the government's inability to fix it. And if you're asking people, if people are sitting there watching us discussing this today, how they can change it, well, we're going to have elections. We're going to have elections next spring. We're going to have a general election in 2028 or 2029, and there is an alternative. I'm not carrying a candle for that any particular party, but there is a candidate, namely Nigel Farage, who is putting forward an alternative. And if you think that he can do a better job than 14 years of Conservative rule or the Labour government at the moment, and bear in mind that Labour may turn it around in that particular amount of time, then there is an alternative. And that's how we should demonstrate any frustration that we feel.
Do you think reform, given their amazing popularity and growing popularity now, but given the time constraints as well, do you think they can be a credible alternative?
It's incredibly difficult. Yes, of course they're credible.
They've got to get enough candidates to get.
Of course, get enough candidates, but of course Nigel Farage can be Prime Minister. But I think Nigel Farage, and he knows this better than anyone, because he told me in a private conversation when Boris Johnson became Prime Minister, he told me in a private conversation, it's not about whether you want the job, it's what you're going to do with the job. And Nigel Farage realises, and he's got to, and it was clear from the speech he gave earlier in the week, that actually he's got to be effective, and that the policy of leaving the ECHR has got to deliver results, because there's a huge amount of frustration out there, and it's frustration at the inability of the Conservatives to do anything, may well be the inability of Labour to do anything, and he needs to deliver.
OK, thanks, Theo. I did say in the last hour, just ignore the ECHR. Why can't we just ignore it? And some people thought I was being flippant by saying that. I'm not. I mean, many countries have ignored ECHR rulings. France did it a couple of years ago with an Uzbekistan guy. They just kicked him out regardless.
But I bet you've got to have your lawyers on your side, haven't you?
The government lawyers. Yes. Well, you've got Lord Hermer at the helm, which says a lot.
Which doesn't say, exactly.